Great, great. I want to break some news to you right off the bat, and it's Lisa's fault. Presbyterians, and here's her phrase, Presbyterians, a.k.a. frozen chosen. We have great difficulty allowing the Holy Spirit to be more, dare I say, expressive in our worship service. If you're visiting us today, sometimes, we kind of get into it, but most of the time we're very demure, I guess is a word to use. So I'm going to ask you just to pretend for a moment, and it may be painful, but just pretend that you're in the shower alone. This is a family show. But you're in the shower, or you're in front of the mirror getting ready for the day and doing what you do in front of a mirror. All right? Got the scene? And then suddenly that song, that concerto, that beautiful opera just rips through your head, right? And you suddenly become transformed into Lady Gaga singing at the Oscars, possibly Mozart performing beautifully a piano concerto, or your old Blue Eyes singing New York, New York. Or you do what I often do. I start to air guitar with Beck or a Jack White. Do you even know who I'm talking about? Okay. Yeah. Or to make it easier for some of us, perhaps Jimi Hendrix. How's that? Does that work for you? All right. Music is a powerful, powerful tool. Research has shown that music can lower our blood pressure. It's good for the heart. It can send chills up and down our spines. I don't know if that's good for us or not, but it can send chills up and down our spine. Children as young as 5 or 6 months of age can respond rhythmically to music. It is a tremendous mood changer. And it simply, in a few words, it makes us feel good. And even when we're sad, we use music to make us feel sad in a good way, right? But it's not the only thing. When you think about things that make us feel good, when we're going through life and everything is just clicking. We got our mojo going, we got our rhythm working here, and everything is just going our way with work, relationships, you name it. All right? And then we start looking for that 7-Eleven, our favorite 7-Eleven, because it's early in the week and I got to buy that lottery ticket because I've won it 2 weeks in a row, so I might as well get the trifecta. We feel that good about life. And we feel so good, so sharp, that we got a whole drawer full of knives. We got our act together. Then, of course, there is the opposite. When absolutely everything is going wrong in our lives. When we are just, the mojo isn't happening. The rhythm's not there. We say the wrong things. We do the wrong things. Just when we think we have all of our Goliaths all lined up, ready to nail them, we remember that we left our slingshot at the back door as we took off that day. Seasons of discontent. Now, what brought all this on for me was about 5 months ago. I was watching a Westmont chapel, Westmont College up in the Santa Barbara area. I hope most of you are familiar with it. And they have a chapel, and quite often the president of the school will speak. But sometimes they get a guest speaker in. And this one time I was watching it, and it was John Ortberg. He's a Presbyterian pastor at Menlo Park up in the Bay Area. And he made a statement that has stuck with me all of these months, and I've just been waiting to try to weave it into the beginning of a message. and these are my words, but he made an observation. Now remember, he's talking to a room full of Christians primarily, young Christians. But he made the comment that I see all kinds of people who profess to be a Christian, but if you look at their lives today, they don't seem to be very happy. You have a hard time picking out that they really are. And then he made a comment, and he said, do you realize what heaven is going to be like? And he said, it's going to be Jesus all the time. 24/7, or the other word that we might use is eternity. So then he turned it around and he said, the people that I just mentioned a moment ago who profess to be Christians, but their life doesn't seem to exude that, are they really going to be happy in heaven? And so then he went a different direction with it. I'm going this direction. You know, do our lives reflect, does the rhythm of our life reflect the promises that we're going to find in heaven? The reality is that, you know, life is sometimes complicated for us. Being a Christian is not an easy thing to do. And in the words of that great 20th century philosopher, Forrest Gump, in fact, I would like all of us know it. Let's all say it together. Life is like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're going to get. That's amazing that we know that. You know, well, I don't know when that movie was made, but it was a godsend. The junior godsend were in diapers, I think, or not even here, probably. Yeah. So the question I want to ask us today is, you know, how do we get it? How do we experience this spiritual rhythm? How do we live a life here that reflects pretty much what we're going to be promised in heaven? Now, one way to do it is to start making a list of all the things that God has called us to do. And that would be a very worthy endeavor to go through, and it would take us the rest of our time today. But I want us to look at a passage, and it's in Mark chapter 3, and verses 13 through 15. So rather than make a list like this, I want us to look how Jesus addressed his disciples. And we're going to find two things. In verse 13, Jesus went up on the mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, designating them apostles. Now here it comes. That they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach. Two things, right? That we might be with him and that he may send us out. Being with, being sent. And this goes back to what Joyce Meyer was talking about and what my friends and I were doing years and years ago of trying to get people into the Word. We need to spend time being with God. And what that means is that we spend time being alone, in solitude, in meditation, and prayer, and getting into the Word. What happens there is this is where we learn to love God. God begins to speak to us, being with. Then God sends us out. We get sent out. What that means is we go out and God gives us something to do, a mission. He gives us action. We're active as a Christian. And that's where we learn to love our neighbor. Being with, we learn to love our God. Being sent, we learn to love our neighbor. A simple two-step system. And Jesus himself used it. There are many examples, and let's work on an easy one. When Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, what did he do after that for 40 days? He went out into the wilderness, right. He was by himself with his God. And in many cases, we stress the trials that he went through, the temptations, but he was with his God. 40 days later, what happened? What did he do next? We got a bunch of theologians in here, so don't be afraid to speak up. He started his ministry. Yes. The Son of God becomes the Son of Man, and he goes out and begins his ministry, and he starts to select his disciples. Over and over again, we see that, particularly this time of year, where Jesus goes off to be by himself, to be with his Father and to pray and to meditate. Then he comes back, and he talks to his disciples and trains them and sends them out, and they follow the same technique. This is what we call spiritual rhythm. What I'm calling today spiritual rhythm. And when we acquire this, when we are able to be with God, spend time with him, and to be willing to be sent by him, then we get into this two-step idea where we can overcome those days when we leave our slingshot behind, or things aren't going right for us, because that kind of relationship sustains us. Listen to this story. Many years ago, in fact, it's more than I care to admit right now, I had a pastor friend who moved into the Pacific Northwest. He was young. And he bought a little house, and the backyard didn't have any vegetation whatsoever. And so he wanted to put some shrubbery out there and some landscaping and a tree. He liked trees. Pacific Northwest, you pretty much have to. And so he saw this mail order catalog, and it said, for $30, we will send you a whole series of assorted shrubs and plants. And all you have to do is take them out of these take-home cartons and plant them. Now, anytime you see an ad or you hear an ad, what's the next thing they say? But wait, there's more. For $30, you get all of this, and for $1.99 more, plus shipping and handling, separate shipping and handling, you will receive a maple tree. He was so excited. And the picture in this ad showed this beautiful, mature maple tree in autumn in the Pacific Northwest. You know, if you go into the Cascade Range, you see this brilliant, brilliant colors going on. A few days later, a big truck rolls up outside of his house, you know, and his mind's going, you know, the forklift is coming out to move this thing to his backyard. It was not to be. The driver gets out of the truck. It's a big truck, but the driver gets out of the truck. He goes around to the passenger side. He opens the door, and he takes out this box. All right? And he goes to the house, and this is it. And then, of course, the maple tree is an 8-inch stick. All right? How disappointing. But he goes ahead, and he had this place all set up right in the middle of his backyard. And so he plants this stick in the middle of his backyard. Disappointed. In fact, just a few days later, he heard his son playing with his neighbor friend out in the back. And he noticed that the voice level was getting just a little high and a little angry. And so he looked out in the backyard, and his neighbor, the neighbor boy, was chasing his son with a stick. It was this one. He was chasing him with his beloved maple tree. Well, he reminded the boys that, you know, they were ruining his entire landscape project, and that it cost a great deal of money to put this together. Pushing way ahead, 10 or 12 years down the road, lo and behold, that maple tree did start to grow. And over the years, it had suffered a lot of the trauma that trees do. In the Pacific Northwest, there was a storm, and a large branch was broken off. Another couple years, there was an infestation that got into the tree, and they thought they were going to lose it, but it survived. And this pastor would use that tree as an analogy because they planted it just a few months after they had arrived in the Pacific Northwest, and he's still there. And so it kind of represented their family. Trees are absolutely fascinating things. They hold great history for us because they really chronicle what has gone on with the climate, with even the economy. I mean, you can play games with this all day long. It's called the study of dendrochronology, tree time. Or for us mortals, I refer to it as tree rings, all right? That line that marks the boundary between growth seasons. And a tree ring essentially is a scar in between these growth seasons. And it tells us a great deal. We can tell by looking if there's been a lot of rain, if there's been a drought, if there's been fire, and these trees will get scarred. And so what dendrochronologists do is they will do a crosscut and they will take a core sampling of that tree. And that tree then will reveal a history in wood. So my question for you today is, what if we took a core sample of us? And I know you're thinking, oh no, not another colonoscopy here. But I'm talking about a sampling of, if you will, of our heart and our soul. And what will it tell us? Now, first of all, this congregation, and again, I apologize to our visitors, I think we have cornered the market on scar tissue in this congregation. You know, want to see my scars, that kind of thing. This congregation has been through a lot. And just like the scars that are in between the growth season in a tree, we have weathered those. And we have weathered them because we have developed this two-step system. Relationships change. Loved ones pass away. A baby is born. We get a new job. We lose a job. Something happens to the house that's pretty traumatic. We go through seasons where we begin to even doubt our Creator. You know, are you walking with me, God? I just don't feel you there, and we doubt. And then we go through other seasons where we feel that God is just using us over and over, and it's just an exciting time. And I think we have many stories in this congregation of folks who have weathered these storms dramatically well because of following the idea of being with God, spending time with God alone, and being sent, willing to be sent. Now, on the flip side, some of us are overwhelmed with busyness. We get overwhelmed finding time to be with and being sent by God. We're overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the Scriptures and all the nuances that go into it. And this morning, if you're in that boat, and that was really the primary reason that started this whole idea years ago between my friends and myself up in Oregon, was trying to get people, find a way for people to get into the Word, a very simple way. So if you're in that situation, just stop and breathe in and breathe out and just spend some time alone and let God talk to you. I want to read this passage from Zechariah. It's Zechariah chapter 8. And I'm going to read this one from the Message. It's Peterson's book. It's a paraphrased version, if you will. But I like the way he describes it. Zechariah is describing Zion when God comes near. And I think if you read all of Zechariah today, you're going to find a lot of references to the season that we're talking about now with the Christ. But most of the people give their life to Jesus because they run into a church that is just on fire for God. It's a church that understands this rhythm, being with and being sent. Or they run into an individual Christian who is, well, you can just see God in them and everything that they do. The stats have shown that's why people dedicate themselves to Christ. I'm going to read verses 3 through 5, and then I'm going to skip over and read verses 20 through 21. Zechariah, I've moved back to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's new name will be True City, a mountain of God of the angel armies and Mount Holiness. Old men and old women will come back to Jerusalem, sit on benches and on the streets and spin tales, move around safely with their canes, a good city to grow old in. And boys and girls will fill the public parks laughing and playing, a good city to grow up in. People and their leaders will come from all over to see what's going on. The leaders will confer with one another. Shouldn't we get involved in this? Get in on God's blessing? Pray to God of the angel armies? What's keeping us? Let's go. Zechariah is saying that why miss out on what God has to offer us? Or as John Ortberg said a long time ago at Westmont, what's heaven going to be like? I wouldn't want to miss out on that. So, how would you describe your spiritual rhythm in your life today? And I'm not asking for an answer, but think about that. Do your core sampling. And if you're not there yet, don't panic. I am convinced that our God is so big that He is not in a hurry. Just simply take some time, dedicate it to God, be alone, and let God work with you. We have seen some beautiful examples, and we've mentioned them a couple times. When you look at someone like Dorothy McGregor, right? Dorothy Coy, or Bob Lamar, two saints that we have lost recently. At some point in their lives, they made a decision to be with and to be sent. So no matter how scary it was or how simple it was, something as elementary as this, or many other techniques, will get them through. And this is the good news. And the good news is eternal. Praise God. Amen.